turn over the weekend, first saying that Oregon National Guard troops couldn't help restore order, and then nixing an effort to send in troops from California and Texas. Now, President Trump says enough is enough in Portland, and he was furious over the judge's ruling. On the other hand, we have California Governor Gavin Newsom, who celebrated posting this on X. The court granted our request for a temporary restraining order halting any federalization, relocation, or deployment of any Guard members to Oregon from any state. Trump's abuse of power won't stand.
That's Doug Luzader reporting. The shutdown continues with no progress made to fund the government, as both parties standing by their demands. Democrats are vowing to restore over $1 trillion in health care funding, while Republicans are sticking by their clean resolution that would keep funding at current levels. House Appropriations Committee Chair Tom Cole of Oklahoma.
I think the Democrats, quite frankly, just are throwing a temper tantrum. Look, we're willing to negotiate on these other matters, but we're not willing to shut down the government. And it's an enormous mistake. It's costing the American people every day.
Multiple homes in the Outer Banks in North Carolina are collapsing due to recent severe weather.
In Buxton, North Carolina, on the Outer Banks, where beaches once existed, homes are now collapsing. An onward push from tropical systems that were hundreds of miles out into the Atlantic has fueled this catastrophic scenario. Couple that with sea level rise and beach erosion, and the situation is not good. More homes are expected to fall into the sea in the coming days and weeks, as the region is experiencing a king tide and a rare supermoon. All of that put together, and that spells disaster. We'll continue to monitor this on the ground in the Outer Banks. Robert Ray, Fox Weather.
Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin said state Democratic Attorney General candidate Jay Jones should abandon his campaign in disgrace after he once remarked about shooting a former Virginia House Speaker in text messages with another lawmaker.
I thought this was a joke because no one could write this. I mean, this is demented. And here we have the Democrat candidate running for Attorney General, the top cop in Virginia, wishing not only that he had 2 bullets to put in a guy's head, but then he wishes death on his children.
Meanwhile, Virginia's governor has issued an executive directive to protect men who invade women's private spaces.
In what the Family Foundation of Virginia calls a major victory for women and girls across the Commonwealth, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin issued Executive Directive 14 on Thursday. In an interview with AFN, Victoria Cobb, the president of the Family Foundation of Virginia, explained what an executive directive means.
An executive directive is something where the governor is instructing his own personnel. And since the Board of Health is an appointed board, it's him telling his people what he expects them to do.
She said her team is thrilled to hear this news.
Governor Glenn Youngkin has instructed the Board of Health to promulgate regulations, or basically get in place regulations that would ensure that only girls compete in girls' sports and only girls can be found in girls' locker rooms. She said this follows a 14-0 unanimous decision by Virginia's Board of Health to start pursuing these things. For too long, policymakers ignored the voices of women and girls who had been sidelined, silenced, and forced to compete on an unfair playing field.
So when can women and girls see changes?
There's still a process, so this has to work through the regulatory process in Virginia, but we can expect that they will be pushing it even quicker now that the governor is behind it. And so we look forward to the day where we can officially tell our girls that there will be no boys in any of their private spaces or taking their trophies.
I'm Bronson Woodruff.
Wall Street is hanging near its records today as tech stocks keep rising. The S&P 500 rose 0.2%, coming off its latest all-time high. The Dow is down 113 points, and the Nasdaq Composite 0.4% higher. More news available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
This weekend on The Stand Radio, we'll talk about the encouraging new laws being passed in Oklahoma and around the country to protect children online.
One of our goals at AFA is to make big porn like big tobacco. When they target kids, we're going to sue them and we're going to hold them accountable. That's the power of SB 1959, the bill that Senator Albert passed.
The Stand Radio, Saturdays at 4 and Sundays at 8 p.m. Central on AFR.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. I'm Walker Wildmon. Glad to be with you today on the program. We're live. It's a brand new edition of the show, and we're going to have some special guests on with us this hour, so you're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned throughout the entirety of the program. And if you do happen to miss part of it, you can always go over to the podcast library, wherever you listen to podcasts, and just type in the name of the program At the Core and click the subscribe button, and you will be have the show queued up in your library each and every day. All right, let's turn our attention to the scripture, and then we'll jump into some of the items for today. Proverbs chapter 29 is where we are this week. Proverbs chapter 29. Looking at verse 1, this should bring a dose of humility and fear of the Lord to all of our hearts. Proverbs 29, verse 1. A man who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. A man who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. That's Proverbs chapter 29, verse 1. How many of you have been in situations or known someone, and hopefully this hasn't been you, but someone who's been warned of their actions, warned of their words, and warned of the repercussions of their sin if they do not heed the instruction of the Lord, if they do not turn from their ways and turn to the Lord? I mean, we all have ourselves been in this position, right? We're all born into sin, and every one of us knows someone who has been warned of the consequences of godlessness and sin, but some continue in their way. After repeated reproof, they continue in their way. And Proverbs 29, verse 1 ends by saying that such person will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. And you may be saying to yourself, well, I know some people that have been warned of their sin, but they haven't been broken beyond remedy. Well, have they faced judgment? Have they faced final judgment? And this is the ultimate truth with a capital T, is that we are all facing judgment. We will all face judgment one day. And so no one escapes. No unrighteous person who refuses to accept reproof and correction, no one escapes God's righteousness. No one escapes God's justice. And so oftentimes I know as believers, we sometimes get frustrated that, well, we don't think righteousness and justice takes place in the time and the manner and the place we wish it would. But ultimately, at the end of it all, when we face the ultimate judge, God himself, we'll all either be counted as good and faithful servants, or we will be broken beyond remedy. That's Proverbs 29, verse 1. Well, I Voter God has a brand new campaign training course that they're doing live online during the month of end of October and early November. What we're doing here in partnership with iVoterGuide, Debbie Wuffnow, she's been on the program countless times, and iVoterGuide is as a division of AFA Action, which is affiliated here with AFA. iVoterGuide is putting on basically an online training course for individuals that are interested in either working on campaigns or running for public office. And so some of the topics that will be covered will be: what is it like to campaign as a believer, as a Christian? How do you even run an effective campaign? How do you deal with voters and the media? What about raising support? Most importantly, how do you protect your soul and integrity while campaigning for public office? This is a free online course. It's going to take place on Wednesday evenings, starting on October 15th, and it'll run through November 5th. So 4 weeks in a row from 7 to 8:30 Central. This is going to take place live. Bunny Pounds with Christians Engaged will be facilitating it or helping with it, and several others as well. Debbie Wethenow is going to spearhead it, though, on behalf of iVoterGuide. Lastly, the URL is simply iVoterGuide.com/events, iVoterGuide.com/events, and you can go there and register and participate in this online offering that we're doing towards the end of October and early November. All right, one thing I want to get to this segment is this dangerous rhetoric and actions against President Trump's immigration officials. This has been just an all-out assault on federal law enforcement, and to such a degree that these Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Patrol agents are in harm's way every single day. They're getting swarmed by mobs. They're getting rammed by vehicles. They're getting, in many instances, getting shot at, getting assaulted, and the list goes on. And these Democrat governors and mayors are shielding the violent rioters. They are shielding the violent, I'm not even going to call them protesters because this isn't protesting, but they are impeding on federal law enforcement activities to the furthest degree. This is all part of President Trump's deportation operation, which is not unlike any other operation throughout presidential history. President Obama deported millions of illegal immigrants. President Bush, President Clinton, President Biden, they all deported hundreds of thousands and in some instances millions of illegal immigrants. So President Trump is just carrying out his constitutional duties to enforce America's immigration laws. Let's listen to the first clip of the Chicago mayor defying federal law, defying the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution, and claiming that he is developing, quote, ICE-free zones where Immigration and Customs Enforcement are not allowed to set up or operate. Let's listen to clip 3.
Today, we are signing an executive order aimed at reining in this out-of-control administration. The order establishes ICE-free zones. That means that city property and unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids.
Well, there you have it. That's the Chicago mayor, Johnson, saying that he is establishing ICE-free zones, which I don't believe this is actually even legal according to the Constitution and according to federal law. Here's why. If the federal government, specifically federal law enforcement, have a legal reason to be present anywhere they can be, if they have, once again, a legal reason. Now, when you get into private property, you're getting into search warrants or arrest warrants. But as far as operating throughout a city, for example, and on public streets, if the federal law enforcement, and in this case, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has a reasonable cause to pull over a vehicle or to make an arrest or to engage someone that they believe is a suspect, etc., the state or the city cannot impede those federal law enforcement activities. Think about all of the FBI raids that happened under Joe Biden targeting pro-lifers and January 6ers. And I didn't hear anybody saying that the FBI can't be doing that. Well, I don't think they should have been doing it. I think it was a 100% misplaced priorities and not an equal application of the law. But there was no legal or constitutional reasoning against it. It was unjust. It was wrong. But here we have, there actually was some legal reasons against it, but we won't spend too much time on that. But here we have illegal immigrants, many of them with pretty lengthy rap sheets. And our federal immigration officials are doing their job that they're legally mandated to do, and constitutionally as well. And we have Democrat politicians and government officials coming to the aid of Antifa and other NGOs, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations in many instances, that are organizing, funding, and setting up and staging this entire insurrection against our federal government and the sovereignty of the United States of America. That's what this is about. And this is a complete setup. The Democrats, it will come out in due time, mark my word, it will come out that the Democrat Party and their left-wing apparatus organized and staged and set up this entire showdown with President Trump's immigration officials. This started early on, even before the election, with the dangerous rhetoric, death threats against Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, and others. You do not get this level of organization and sophistication and preparedness that these rioting groups are showing without a central organizing figure or figures. This doesn't happen organically. You don't look at a peaceful protest with 5,000 people and go, wow, that just spawned up today. I mean, nobody organized it. Nobody pulled permits to protest. Nobody blocked off streets. Nobody sent out emails with dates and locations and times and where to show up and what to bring and what not to bring. I mean, and the stage and the speakers. I mean, this just was purely organic. No. Any protest, peaceful or not, you look at with any number of people. In this instance, we've got hundreds, if not thousands in some cases, when you go over to California. You don't look at that and go, wow, they just happened to all show up at the same time in the same place. No, this is organized. And when you have organized illegal activity, there's reason for arrest and there's reason for criminal investigation. And I want to know in some of these cases, how many permits, because you have to pull permits to protest. You can't just show up on public property or private property. You can't show up on private property unless you own it. But you can't show up on public sidewalks or public streets and shut down the street without a permit. Like, this stuff has to be planned out. City has to approve, etc. But you've got Portland, now Chicago, Los Angeles. These streets have been completely given over to lawlessness. And when we come back out of the break, we'll play a brief clip before we jump to our guest of the Chicago Police Department being ordered to stand down when immigration officials were being attacked, vehicles were being rammed by criminals. Immigration officials requested the assistance of Chicago Police Department, and Chicago Police Department officials said, no, we're not showing up. We've been instructed not to show up and assist. And this is putting people in danger. I watched a clip over the weekend, just yesterday, of this was two federal law enforcement agents that were making an apprehension. And by the way, this notion, and then I'll finish the story before we wrap up this segment, this notion that the majority of illegal immigrants have clean records other than the federal law breaking of crossing our border, which is a kind of a big deal. This notion that many of these illegal immigrants have clean records, no rap sheets, is just a flat-out lie. Even some of the, quote, non-violent illegal immigrants have extensive records of DUI, of driving without a license, reckless driving, driving without insurance, possession of illegal substances. I mean, there's long rap sheets. They may not be, quote, violent, but they've had multiple run-ins with law enforcement. But these two officers were by themselves trying to make an arrest, get surrounded by a mob, and end up having to flee. It's a tragedy. It's a breakdown of law and order. We'll be back.
The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests who were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Jeremiah descended from a priestly lineage in Judah. He grew up in Anathoth, about 2 to 4 miles northeast of Jerusalem, where the temple was located. He began ministering prophetically about 627 BC, during the 13th year of King Josiah's reign. This is about 5 years before Josiah began Judah's spiritual reformation. It is very likely that Josiah's reformation was influenced by Jeremiah's preaching.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
If you are 65 or older, you know this, inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to health care. Over the last 10 years, health care costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and copayments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now, 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE, 833-45-BIBLE.
Hey, my name is Wesley Wildmon.
And I'm Walker Wildmon.
And we're brothers, and our family have been leading tours to the land of the Bible for more than 30 years.
Coming up in March of 2026, we would love for you to join us for something very special, a Footsteps of Paul tour, a journey through Greece.
We'll walk exactly where the Apostle Paul walked, through Athens, ancient Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica.
You'll enjoy unforgettable experiences and meaningful fellowship with believers and with Wesley and Walker.
And we'll eat well, laugh a lot, and yes, eat well again. And most importantly, we will grow in our faith as the Bible comes alive before your eyes. You'll get to see the very things that we read about or that your pastor talks about in church.
The Footsteps of Paul tour is March 17th through the 24th, 2026.
Register today at wildmangroup.com.
That's wildmangroup.com. We can't wait to see you there.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here. Glad to have you with us. We'll continue this discussion about the rampant lawlessness around the country. This is a 100% pure setup by the Democrats. Democrats, and this was leaked in some of their strategy documents before and after the election of 2024. But what they're wanting to do here, and once again, you can look at reporting on this leading up to today, and then you can look at to see what President Trump's investigations bear out over the next few months. But what the Democrats want to do here, and they're on the precipice of doing it, they want to force President Trump into a showdown of the feds versus Democrat cities, including the National Guard. And by doing so, Democrats will have their talking points ready. And then they'll say this, and I'm not saying this is right. I'm just telling you what's going to happen so that we're not brainwashed by the propaganda. And you can spot it for what it is. The Democrats will say that we told you this was a king. We told you that the president was a king, which is contradictory in and of itself. But we told you Trump was a king, and this is federal overreach, and President Trump's troops have no business in our state. And this is what they'll say. They'll keep saying it. And he's abusing his power, and he's abusing his authority, and we must make sure that MAGA Republicans never step foot near a seat of power in our country again. Something like that is what they'll say. And then if Democrats take over the House of Representatives, and I'm not wishing this upon anyone or any country or any citizen, but if Democrats were to take control of the House of Representatives, they will open impeachment proceedings against President Trump for, quote, abusing his authority or whatever other thing they want to make up. This is all part of the plan. Now, whether this plan succeeds or not is still to be determined. This is not a foregone conclusion. This is not a self-fulfilled prophecy yet, all right? And I don't think President Trump has an option here but to do what he's doing, because think about this. Think about this. You cannot have an election that we did in 2024 where the overwhelming majority of both the popular vote, the majority of the popular vote, and the overwhelming majority of the electoral vote went towards President Trump, went in favor of President Trump. And what he campaigned on is what we are seeing. Not the rioting and the looting. He campaigned on enforcing America's immigration laws. Okay? So you cannot, in a democracy, and they love to throw around the word democracy, in a constitutional republic and a representative democracy, of which we are, you cannot cede ground to lawlessness. You cannot. You cannot cede ground to lawlessness and anarchy. And so President Trump is doing what he has to do. You cannot, quote, give up in Democrat cities, in Democrat states, because the locals are not cooperating. You can't do it. You have to push through and enforce America's laws. And so let's play this clip real quick, and then we'll jump to our next guest. This is going to be a Fox report on the Chicago Police Department initially refusing to support our immigration officials who were under attack. Clip 5.
In Chicago, sources telling Fox News police there were told to actually stand down on helping ICE agents who are in danger. Mike Tobin has this story for us, all the details. Hi, Mike.
And Dana, we've got a lot of rank and file Chicago police officers behind the scenes telling us that they are outraged that the stand down order went out to them after federal agents were attacked. The order appears to have come through a communication from the chief of patrol over the communication through the Office of Emergency Management and Communication, reading, "No units will respond to this." Multiple police sources have confirmed to us the message is authentic, and it is backed up by audio of the stand down order.
And again, per the chief of patrol, we have all the units that per 999, chief of patrol said all units clear out from there. We're not sending anybody over to that location. All right, and 999, just to confirm, 39th Police in Kedzie, they were saying that they were being surrounded by that large crowd, and they were requesting the police were not sending. I'm waving off all the cars heading to 39th Police in Kedzie.
Again, those are the orders we're being given. In an official statement, CPD says officers did respond. Writing, quote, CPD responded to the scene to document the incident. CPD officers were also on the scene to maintain safety and traffic control. Now, chaos was triggered when, according to federal prosecutors, two individuals used their cars to ram the cars of Border Patrol agents. One of the agents shot a driver of one attacking vehicle. Those attackers are now charged federally. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says the facts need to play out.
Well, there you have it. The facts need to play out. What else do we need to know here for the facts to play out? I love how they say that. But when something happens, as clear as Charlie Kirk being assassinated by a left-winger, they go, well, we just don't really know what's going on. What do we have to see? And then they never see. Same thing with the media. So, no, there's no more facts that need to play out other than President Trump is going to have to deploy National Guard to get this under control. And he has the legal authority to do so. And so some judges don't think he do not think that he does have the authority, but it's clear constitutionally and otherwise that the president does, under certain circumstances such as this, he can federalize the National Guard because federal assets are being attacked, and federal agents are being attacked as well. Bobby, do we have Chris with us on the phone? Great. Chris McDaniel is a Mississippi State Senator, former Mississippi State Senator, and he's with us now. Chris, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be here. I am sorry for that technology mess up earlier. I was supposed to be there on Zoom, but I could not get it to work, so that must be on me. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, no problem, Chris. Let me get your thoughts on this. We've been covering this immigration issue and the fact that Antifa and other groups are just going after, both physically and otherwise, federal immigration officials. Give us your thoughts on this issue and the president needing to federalize some of these National Guard troops.
Well, we're in a battle. There's no question about that. And the battle is not only a battle of ideas at this stage, but we're trying to preserve what's left of a great country. Not only the Constitution, but borders, for goodness sakes. You know, you think about the idea, it used to not be contested that a country has borders, and those borders have to be secure. And the modern Democrats seem to have gone off in left field and once again are more of a threat to our country's continued existence than they are having any solutions as to how to save it. Of course, the federal government has federal immigration authority. The Constitution delegates that authority to the federal government. It's their job to enforce it. And I'm really happy to see someone finally take an action to do so. I actually witnessed it a couple of weeks ago. I was up in Chicago, and I was able to see this firsthand. And in many respects, it made me happy because they're just enforcing the law. And, you know, we're a nation of laws, not of men. That was the underlying cornerstone of this country. And so to see officers up there doing their job, many of which, by the way, are Hispanic. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Many of those officers are Hispanic, and they're enforcing the law without regard to countries of origin. If you're against or you're violating our laws, you have to be picked up. So listen, I'm all for it. I'm all for the enforcement. I think it's a good move in the right direction.
Let me ask you this. Once again, we're talking to former Mississippi State Senator Chris McDaniel, who has run for U.S. Senate and has run for lieutenant governor here in the state. Jackson, and you and I didn't talk before the interview, so I'm literally throwing you curveballs here. But the Jackson, Mississippi, this is our own backyard here. Jackson, Mississippi, of which you've spent years, serving in Jackson, is notorious for rampant crime in Jackson, Mississippi. People don't want to live there in Jackson proper. They don't want to go there unless they have to. Very, very sad for the state of Mississippi. There was some talk about, hey, why didn't President Trump just work with Governor Tate Reeves and, deploy the National Guard in Jackson to clean up the streets? And, some Republicans have said, well, we've got another approach, which I understand the governor and Republicans do have a different kind of approach that they're currently working on. But is that working in Jackson? Is Jackson getting better, or is it still a major issue there as far as crime in Jackson, Mississippi?
Yeah, it's in terrible condition, certainly. And there's a couple of issues to think about where we're using federal troops, for example, for law enforcement positions that are outside of its natural purview. It's one thing to send troops in to enforce immigration law, but just for a police force in a state city, that could be seen as constitutionally problematic, even under the broad laws given to the president. So put that aside just for a second. The situation with Jackson is difficult because it's a culmination of several generations of fathers not being in the household, a combination of several generations of families breaking to pieces, depending on the government to be there for them, to provide cradle to grave, all of these things that governments claim they can provide. And so the culture is degraded in that city and in other parts of our state, in other parts of our country. So until we get to the root cause of this, which is parental involvement and the lack of a two-parent household, I'm afraid you're always going to have some violence in Jackson. Now, with that said, that's not to say government doesn't have a role. State government certainly has a role there, and I think the Capitol has expanded its police force over the years to try to help kind of get that crime under control. But, man, all the laws in the world can't change the human heart. And certainly we have to try to control it. We have to be forceful. We have to create new judges and prosecutors that would go after these people committing these crimes. But there's an underlying condition also we have to find a way to solve. And, man, our country needs a revival. It needs folks to stand up and be heard again and to change the hearts of these people. And that's how you get real change in the country.
Hey, man, we're seeing hopefully some of that with the assassination, the tragedy of Charlie Kirk, and what all has been going on in our country. I think young people are hungry for truth, or hungry for something more than themselves and more than what this world offers. And so hopefully we're beginning to see some of that heart change that you're talking about. Once again, we're talking to Chris McDaniel, former state senator here in Mississippi. Chris, what are you up to now? And are you planning on any more public office runs? Because we've got a gubernatorial race coming up in Mississippi and some other seats as well. So what's your plans?
Well, right now, all the options are on the table. You know, I've been fighting for conservatism for the last 20 years. It's my beating heart. And for 20 years, we've had a message of individual liberty. We've had a message of American exceptionalism. And I think now that message is probably resonating more than ever before. And when you see people that are assassinated because of their belief systems, when you see people like Charlie Kirk, who died as a martyr not only for his God, but also for the Constitution and a mindset that values liberty, I think there's a message out there that needs to resonate. Now, is it me? I don't know about that. But I know it needs to be said. It needs to be said with force. It needs to be said with consistency. And it needs to be said without any more compromise.
Yeah.
And so we're looking for fighters. I am a fighter, so I'm never going to say no. I'm just keeping all the options on the table right now.
Good stuff, Chris. Well, you've been a fighter for the conservative cause, for the same ideals of our founding fathers, and so it's been great to see you serve in the state capitol over the years and run for various positions. And at a minimum, Chris, you're running in some of these races, including against the late Thad Cochran. It shifted the dynamic in the state, shifted the conversation. And I was going to say between you and I, but we're on live national radio. Mississippi, we need more conservative fighters in prominent positions of government. We've unfortunately had some retirements and some term limits that have taken place to where we're not quite as conservative as we once were from a party leadership standpoint across the state. So I'm hoping folks like you maybe step back into the gap, and I'll give you last word.
I appreciate you saying that, and you're exactly right. Just because someone runs as a Republican doesn't mean they're a conservative. Not anymore. We've had too many party switchers. We've had too many people fool us for far too long. We need principled men and women that refuse to sacrifice the things they believe in, and those things happen to be what makes this country great. So to the extent I can be a part of that, I'm in. To the extent I can support people like that, I'm in, because goodness knows the country is in tough shape. It may get worse before it gets better, but we got to stand. We got to stand right now.
Amen. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for jumping on with us.
Guys, thank you all very much for having me. Take care. God bless.
Absolutely. That's Chris McDaniel, good friend of myself and the ministry here. And when he was in the state legislature, man, he was a fighter. He led the litigation against Obamacare, the so-called Affordable Care Act, as unaffordable as it is, and has been fighting for conservative values for over a decade. And so we appreciate his work. And folks, this year, there's a couple states where we have statewide elections, New Jersey, Virginia. We need to keep an eye on those. It's going to give us a little bit of taste of what the midterms are going to look like here just next year. Once we hit January, we'll be officially in midterm season. Some say we already are, and that's crazy to think as we're just kind of catching our breath from the last presidential election. But hey, here coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to talk with Pete Sepp with National Taxpayer Union, president there, about this government shutdown that is now approaching its first full week and not really an end in sight. No party seems to be rushing back to Washington to save the day. Both parties seem to be kind of digging their heels in. And, Chuck Schumer's not polling very well on this. It's looking really bad for the Democrats here because the same essence, the same bones of the spending bill that the Republicans have proposed is what the Democrats have already voted for multiple times in the recent years, over 13 times. And so it's not really a lot that the Republicans are asking for here. It's pretty much the status quo. And Chuck Schumer is following the lead of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in demanding funding for health insurance for illegal immigrants. Imagine that. We'll be back in a few.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildmon and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
The enemy wants to destroy anything of God's, especially mankind who is made in God's image.
What would it be like if every person knew that they were created in the image of God?
We're talking about people loved by the Father, people for whom Jesus died.
We have to stand on God's truth.
We hear in culture all the time, we need to find ourselves. We need to go find our identity. We are already defined. We are known before the foundations of the world.
In His Image is a life-changing film that has helped people break free from the grip of evil. It will take you through Scripture to show the truth, and its powerful testimonies will destroy Satan's attempts to pervert God's perfect design.
We now know with the genome of all of the DNA that there is no propensity towards a genetic disposition to homosexual behavior.
Watch it for the first time or again with someone who needs to see it. Get the 2-DVD set at resources.afa.net.
In Daniel 12:4, an angel told Daniel that in the last days, knowledge will increase. Today, our knowledge is indeed experiencing exponential growth. The old joke goes, your computer is obsolete when you take it out of the box. Computer processing speeds double about every 18 months. In the next 5 years, the world's technology will be 32 times more advanced than it is today. This exponential increase in knowledge is fascinating, but let's not miss this sign. Despite having the blessing of instantaneous global communication and advanced technology, we still need biblical revelation and spiritual discernment to make sense of what we're seeing. This increase in knowledge points to the fact that we're living in the prophesied end times. Jesus is coming soon. Now that's knowledge worth knowing. This is Tim Moore wishing you Godspeed.
We're dedicated to proclaiming to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, that Jesus is returning soon. Find out more at christinprophecy.org.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildman.
Welcome back to the program. And, one note on this immigration issue and President Trump enforcing America's immigration laws. I saw where in the part of the spending, the One Big Beautiful Bill that President Trump coined, the phrase there, the name of it, part of that was funding for up to, I believe, 100,000 immigrations and customs enforcement officers, which I thought, when I read that, I was like, wow, we need there's enough work for 100,000 more on top of what we already have. And then I see these poor men, law enforcement in the streets, like 2 of them up against a mob of 30. And I'm thinking, yeah, they need backup. They need reinforcements. It's sad. It shouldn't be this way. But with the attack on the federal law enforcement, I think they do need reinforcements. And so I think that was a really wise move to bring a lot of these retired law enforcement and retired military back into service. And so that's what's going on now, and it couldn't be needed any more than it is now. I want to jump to our next guest. Pete Sepp is with us. He's president of the National Taxpayer Union, here to talk about this government shutdown that nobody in flyover country is really that sad about, except for maybe people who get government subsidies that aren't getting them anymore. Nonetheless, Pete, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Well, Pete, give us a breakdown of some of the items that Democrats are holding out for in these negotiations over government spending.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Walker. The folks in flyover country are kind of wondering, well, what's the problem with Washington shutting down? And sure, there are some. There are the facts that the federal government pays some late fees and interest on contracts that get suspended. It's $400 million a day to pay furloughed employees. They get back pay when they're furloughed. Those kinds of things aside, though, there's a lot at stake in this shutdown fight. The government shuts down when it cannot agree on providing funding for the next fiscal year. Fiscal year 26, well, we're already in that. It began on October 1st without an agreement on how to fund the federal government. That's why we're shut down right now. The Democrats are holding out for a deal that will reopen the government and roll back a lot of the progress we have made in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as well as some additional sweeteners to something called the premium tax credit. These are all things that taxpayers, especially those in the pro-life movement, should be very concerned about.
Yeah, the subsidies you're talking about are they're related to the Affordable Care Act that isn't really affordable, but that's what they wanted to call it, otherwise known as Obamacare. Democrats have said, this isn't a secret, that one of the things they are fighting for, amongst many, is these subsidies. So tell us a little bit about how these subsidies work and how, correct me if I'm wrong, but these subsidies are used to offset the damage of Obamacare, basically, because it's so expensive.
Yes, that's right. Obamacare has not appreciably increased overall health insurance coverage. People should know that. Since its enactment almost 15 years ago, Obamacare has only affected the total number of insured Americans in this country by about 1 percentage point, but it has made insurance much less affordable. The coverage costs have gone up dramatically. These premium tax credits were originally designed when Obamacare passed to help people afford health insurance, but they were limited to folks who had 400% or less of the federal poverty level. It capped out-of-pocket contributions for premiums, and it did other things to try to at least control the cost of the premium tax credit. Well, along came COVID and the government's response to that. What was passed in 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act, just blew the lid off these subsidies. The income cap of 400% of federal poverty to qualify for it, done away with. Fully subsidized healthcare premiums for anyone earning between 100 and 150% of the federal poverty level. Zero out-of-pocket costs for those folks. So the cost of the premium tax credits expanded dramatically after 2021. Well, Democrats who passed that 2021 law and an extension of these tax credits in 2025 said, 2023, they said, we're going to let it all expire by the end of 2025. The emergency will be over and we can go back to the old Obamacare premium tax credits. Well, they lied. They want a full permanent extension to go on forever and ever. And the price tag is huge. $400 billion with a B dollars over 10 years if Democrats get their way. They also want to roll back work requirements for able-bodied adults. That's $325 billion in cost over 10 years. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was actually limiting the way that states get to launder Medicaid money and increase federal aid through a complex tax scheme on providers. If Democrats get their way, that's another $191 billion in taxpayer costs over the next 10 years, allowing Medicaid enrollees to claim benefits in multiple states. Democrats want that. $17 billion, allowing illegal immigrants to claim Medicaid. We've all heard about that. $6.2 billion over 10 years. In other words, Democrats want close to $1 trillion in additional money from taxpayers to roll back what President Trump just signed and keep in place their old legislation from the COVID era. We can't afford it.
Yeah. This is a shakedown if I've ever seen one. And I've got clips that we don't have time to play today, but I've got clips of Democrats doing interviews saying, yeah, this is our only leverage. The budget is our only leverage. And if we don't hold the line here, we won't have any leverage. Well, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you don't have majority in the chambers of the legislature. Like wake up to the reality that when you're in the minority, this is how things work, right? If you want to regain your, quote, leverage, well, you ought to win elections. That's what happens. And so what's so disappointing, but I shouldn't be disappointed, is that, once again, we're talking to Pete Sepp with the National Taxpayers Union. What's so disappointing is that if Republicans try to do this, meaning they use their votes to shut down the government because they're not getting something they want, when Republicans do this, it's the end of the world. Grandma isn't getting her check. People are dying in ER rooms, because the government's not open. America's airspace is more dangerous because TSA employees aren't being paid. And they go through this laundry list of apocalyptic scenarios that are currently taking place when the government shuts down. And it's big, bad Republicans that need to come along to get along. But here we are, Pete, and the media is not really concerned about this. I mean, it's just, business as usual. The government's not open, and who cares,
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to witness. And, 3 Democrats in the United States Senate actually voted for what was called the Clean CR. In other words, the bill that Republicans on the House side passed that said, okay, let's just have a continuing resolution of funding, keeping the federal government open, providing money for it to operate at its current level through November, and we can keep discussing the future of some of these healthcare programs. Most Democrats in the Senate, and all of them in the House, voted against that, except for 1 in the House. But 3 in the Senate said, well, that's not a bad deal. Let's pass that continuing resolution, the clean one, instead of this dirty one that I think you could call it. That was John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, and Angus King of Maine. Now, that's important because if you line that up with the Republicans in the Senate who voted for it, all but 1, you have a 55 to 45 vote margin. You need 5 more votes, a total of 60, to break what's called a filibuster and move forward with passing that clean continuing resolution. So if 5 more Democrats decide that they want to live up to their words, get the federal government open again, and continue talking rather than folding up their tent and going away, we can end the shutdown. I hope that we'll do something much more comprehensive than that and finally say we cannot continue this course of spending money out of an empty pocket. Rolling back the reforms that were just enacted and continuing subsidies that were designed for an emergency are absolutely off the table.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to watch because if, to your point, if Republicans peel off 5 more Senate votes, Chuck Schumer is not in a good position here. He is in a very weak negotiating position when he already has 3 party defectors, which in negotiations like this, almost everybody, almost 100% of the party toes the line. They toe the party line of the leader, quote, of their party, in this case, Minority Leader Schumer. To have defectors this early on in the shutdown, which they had defectors in the days before the shutdown, is a very big deal. So I think if Schumer continues to dig in his heels, continues to not want to pass the bill to fund the government, I think Chuck Schumer and the Democrats risk peeling off, losing more Senate votes, and you could have John Thune and 7 or 8 Democrats funding the government, and Chuck Schumer's left over here by himself. That could be very, very embarrassing.
Yeah, and quite possible. I would say if any of your listeners live in New Hampshire, you've got 2 senators there, Democrats, who have signaled that they may be willing to vote for this clean continuing resolution. John Ossoff, Senator, Democrat from Georgia, might be someone who would be willing to vote with Republicans. You could also get Gary Peters, Democrat senator from Michigan. If any of your listeners live in those states, putting pressure on them now with phone calls and emails to go along with a clean continuing resolution could make the difference here.
Absolutely. Hey, Pete, tell folks how to read more about your work.
They can visit us online at NTU, our initials for National Taxpayers Union, NTU.org.
All right. Thanks so much, Pete. Appreciate you coming on the program.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. That's Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayer Union, talking about the government shutdown and the wish list that the Democrats have out there on the table. You know, I think they need to fund the government. Go ahead and fund it for the full year. Because here we are, they're going to fund it. If this continuing resolution passes as it stands today, it funds the government into November. But here we are, we're a week into October, and we'll blink, and then we'll be negotiating the same thing in 4 or 5 weeks. And so this 4-week funding, 6-week funding is just not a way to govern. I mean, no household that has any wisdom, or a business for this matter, especially, funds their operation a week at a time or 4 weeks at a time. No, you have a plan, you have a year, and you budget things out and you plan and you be responsible. You be an adult. But our politicians in Washington, they can't even do this. And this is one of the most fundamental acts of Congress, the funding of the government through the appropriations process, which is completely broken, by the way. They're not even following the proper constitutionally outlined appropriations process. You're supposed to have at least a dozen appropriation funding bills that come out of committee to the full floor in both chambers, originating in the House, actually, and voted on and signed one by one by the president. And see, this is where it just baffles me why they don't do this the right way. Because if you've got 3 things in your negotiations that you're trying to get out of this, but you agree on 90% of everything else, and you've got, let's just say, 10% of something you want to negotiate about, Obamacare subsidies or whatever, and then you got 90% of everything else, like, hey, let's fund the military, let's fund the Department of Homeland Security, let's fund the IRS, whatever, Department of State, and we all agree on that. So let's go ahead and fund that, get that behind us so we can keep arguing about this other stuff. Why would you not do that? Instead, they hold the entire, and Republicans have done this too, they hold the entire thing hostage. The Republicans are just as guilty of this, not wanting to pass individual spending bills. Instead, they bundle it all into this dumb thing called a continuing resolution. And this started under Obama, by the way. Continuing resolution, and then they argue about stuff and they hold everybody hostage. All the military's hostage, every agency, everybody who gets a penny from the government is held hostage to the negotiations over a very tiny fraction of the budget. So this is just one more example of the brokenness that is Washington. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.